thrill seekers. I don't think I should name that song, because who knows what YouTube copyright things would get me in trouble. Anyway, it's an appropriate song for that guitar. That's all I'll say. An appropriate song for that guitar. So, somebody, a friend of mine, sent me an email asking me if he remembered right that Nishijima Roshi, my teacher, had once said that Zen Buddhism would save the world, or Zen Buddhism could save the world. And I don't remember Nishijima Roshi ever saying that Zen Buddhism would save or could save the world. And I don't think he would have said that. And whether or not Zen Buddhism could save the world or not, the focus of the question became slightly different for me, because I started thinking about why he wouldn't have phrased the statement that way, whether or not he thought it could save the world being a different issue, because he wouldn't have said Zen Buddhism. Why wouldn't he have said Zen Buddhism? Because Nishijima Roshi didn't believe there was any such thing as Zen Buddhism. So I'd like to explain that. Now, in my own writings, I have used the phrase Zen Buddhism fairly frequently, and usually when I say Zen Buddhism, in those, the word Zen Buddhism or the phrase Zen Buddhism, I put some caveats around it. And if you've read my books, you've read those, and I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what I've said about it, but I usually say something like, I think that Zen Buddhism is Buddhism that emphasizes Zazen as its main source of practice, and that since Shakyamuni Buddha is reputed to have taught Zazen as his main form of practice, as his main thing, the main thing he did was go around India teaching people to meditate, then all Buddhism is Zen Buddhism. And that is kind of my light way of saying this. Now, Nishijima Roshi took a much harder line, which is that there is no Buddhism except Zen Buddhism. Well, he wouldn't have said it that way either. He would have said that the Buddhism he taught was just Buddhism. It wasn't the Zen sect of Buddhism, it was Buddhism. And that this is just Buddhism. Now, where did he get that, you might ask? And he got that from Dogen, and it comes from a certain part of Shobogenzo. Well, actually, technically it isn't part of Shobogenzo. It's from an essay called Bendowa, which is, let's see how, I want to give you the translation that Nishijima Roshi chose to call it. He calls it a talk on pursuing the truth, a talk about pursuing the truth. Some people give it other titles. Technically speaking, Bendowa isn't part of Shobogenzo. All of the Shobogenzo chapters, or I think most of them, are officially titled Shobogenzo something, and Bendowa doesn't have that title. It's just called Bendowa, so it seems that Dogen intended it to be its own thing, but most people include it as part of Shobogenzo these days. So that's, and also Nishijima Roshi included it as part of Shobogenzo. And part of Bendowa is a little FAQ thing, frequently asked questions. In fact, in my book, Don't Be a Jerk, I called it Dogen's FAQ. And it consists, or the second part of it consists of several questions from, it probably came from one of his students, maybe Keizan, I'm not sure. And they are questions about Zen, about Buddhism and Zen. And one of the questions goes like this. Let me read it to you. Someone asks, among the three kinds of training, and the three kinds of training are precepts, the balanced state, and wisdom. Okay, among the three kinds of training, there is training in the balanced state, and among the six paramitas are, let's see, keeping the precepts, patience, diligence, and the practice of dhyana, meditation, and real wisdom. Sorry, I think that's 6. Anyway, there is the dhyana paramita. Dhyana is generally translated as meditation, both of which all bodhisattvas learn from the outset and all bodhisattvas practice. So let's see, the 3 kinds of training in the 6 paramitas, that's the both he's talking about, regardless of whether they are clever or stupid. The zazen that you are discussing now is surely only one of these. Why do you say that the Tathagatas, that's the Buddha's right dharma, is concentrated in this practice of zazen? Okay, and here's Dogen's response. I say, the question arises because this right dharma eye treasury, that's Shobo Genzo, the supreme and great method, which is the one great matter of the Tathagata, has been called the Zen sect. Now, I should stop here, and I've noticed that Europeans who speak English will often use the word sect, the English word sect, the way English speakers use the word cult. And cult has kind of a derogatory meaning of a sort of, well, a cult, a bad religion, a religion that does, you know, sort of bad things. They do drugs and have orgies and do, you know, what a cult is. You probably know what a cult is. In sort of regular English, if you're an English-speaking European and don't know this, in sort of normal English parlance, sect has a kind of a neutral meaning. It just means one sort of division among a religion, so it doesn't have a derogatory meaning. So it doesn't have a derogatory meaning in this usage. It has been called the Zen sect. Remember that this title, Zen sect, was established in China and the East. It was not heard in India, so it's not part of the original thing of Buddhism. When the great master Bodhidharma first stayed at Shaolin Temple in the Sung Shan Mountains and faced the wall for 9 years, monks and laymen were still ignorant of the Buddha's right dharma, so they called Master Bodhidharma a Brahmin who made a religion of Zazen. Thereafter, the patriarchs of successive generations all constantly devoted themselves to Zazen. Stupid secular people who saw this, not knowing the reality, talked at random of a Zazen sect. Nowadays, dropping the word za, which means sitting, they talk of just the Zen sect, nowadays being the 1200s in Japan. This interpretation is clear from records of the patriarchs, what records existed back then. Zazen should not be discussed as the balanced state of dhyana in the 6 paramitas and the 3 kinds of training. I stumbled over this phrase when I was reading it this morning preparing for this video, and what he means here is it shouldn't be discussed as just one of those things. It kind of, the way this translation reads sounds like it shouldn't be discussed as the balanced state, but Nishijima Roshi always discussed Zazen as the balanced state. He means it shouldn't be discussed as just one of those things. It's bigger than that. That's what he means here. That this Buddha Dharma is the legitimate intention of the one-to-one transmission has never been concealed through the ages. This Buddha Dharma is Zazen. That's what he means. In the order on Vulture Peak in ancient times, that's Buddha's order, when the Tathagata Buddha gave the Dharma to Venerable Mahakashapa, that's his student who he entrusted the Dharma to, who became his first successor, transmitting the right Dharma eye treasury and the fine mind of nirvana, that's his Dharma transmission, his making of Mahakashapa his successor, the supreme and great method only to him, the ceremony was witnessed directly by beings among the celestial throng which are present in the world above, so it must never be doubted. It is a universal rule that those celestial beings will guard and maintain the Buddha Dharma eternally. Their efforts have never faded. Just remember that this transmission of Zazen is the whole truth of the Buddha's Dharma. Nothing can be compared to it. And he says some things after that. There's 2 more questions that follow on from this that kind of say the same thing, but basically what Dogen is saying here is that Zazen is Buddhism. And this is a really strong statement. So he's saying that all of Buddhism is contained within the practice of Zazen, and that there is no Zen Buddhism. There is no sect that can be called Zen Buddhism, that what Dogen teaches is just Buddhism. So he's kind of laying down a really firm line here and saying, this is Buddhism. And kind of by inference, although he doesn't say it here, he kind of says it in other places, he's saying that anything that isn't Zazen isn't Buddhism. Any kind of Buddhism that doesn't include the practice of Zazen isn't Buddhism. Now, Nishijima Roshi, my teacher, kept this kind of hard line when he taught. So he definitely also said this. When I started kind of teaching independently, and especially when I started writing books and teaching in America, I found that when I said things like this, it got me in trouble. It got people mad, and they considered me to be sectarian and intolerant, and, you know, we in the West have kind of a bad history when it comes to this kind of stuff with, you know, the Crusades and a lot of religious intolerance and a lot of religious movements that have kind of gone out there and slaughtered other religions. In Asia, you don't really have that kind of history. I don't know, maybe somebody in the comments section will point out something that I don't know about, but I'm not aware of anything comparable to the Crusades or anything like that where one religion has gone out and tried to kill everybody of another religion. That seems to be kind of something that we in the West have done, that the Christians and well, that other religion that begins with an M that I'm not going to single out because you get in trouble when you talk about certain religions. Those religions have done that a lot. Buddhism and Hinduism haven't done it so much. I guess in the modern period there's been a bit of that, but not in the sort of in historical times. You know, there hasn't been a lot of that going on, and so it isn't such a big deal in Asia to make statements like this. It doesn't raise so many people's rankles. Raise so many people's rankles? Anyway, it doesn't get you into trouble so much to say this over there. But if you say this kind of stuff over here in the United States and probably in Europe as well, people get really upset. So I started in my writings to just be like, okay, yeah, there is the Zen sect, there is Zen Buddhism, and it's differentiated from other forms of Buddhism by this, that, and the other thing, and I accept the fact that people designate that what I do is the Zen sect of Buddhism, and it's, you know, and that there's other forms of Buddhism and so on and so forth. And I certainly don't want to destroy other forms of Buddhism or really even denounce them. I think I can learn a lot. I've been talking about the Tibetan Book of the Dead recently, and yesterday I talked about Tendai Buddhism, and I've been talking about Yogacara Buddhism and other forms of Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism, and I think we can learn a lot from those forms of Buddhism. So I don't have any great disrespect for them. So I don't want to, you know, make it sound like I do. But I think this kind of thing is interesting, this kind of hard line that Dogen takes. And when I first encountered it in Nishijima Roshi, I had the same kind of reaction that a lot of Americans, a lot of Westerners do. I was like, oh my God, you're saying, it sounds like you want to go and burn down, you know, all the other forms of Buddhism and you know, send them to the, I don't know where you want to send them to, you know, send them to some bad place. And it took me a while to figure out, no, that isn't what he was doing. I think what it really is a kind of expression of kind of profound confidence, and I learned to appreciate that. And I think that anybody who is honest about what they teach is going to have that kind of confidence in it. If I didn't think that this form of Buddhism was the best, I wouldn't be practicing it. I wouldn't have devoted my life to something other than the form of Buddhism, or the religion, if we want to call it a religion, or the practice that I thought was the best one. I'm not going to, pick the second best or the third best, or a practice that I think is just, equal to any other practice that I could have chosen, and devote my life to that. I'm going to devote my life to the one that I think is the best. And if I'm honest, I'll say it's the best. But there is a kind of stigma in the West against saying that, and so I kind of censor myself a little bit in saying that, and I don't say that. But, here's a video in which I'm letting you in on the secret that I secretly think that the Soto style of Zen is the best. But, having said that, I find myself lately more and more wanting to distance myself from institutionalized Soto Zen Buddhism. Like, I want nothing to do with most of the American and Japanese institutions that claim to be the representatives of Dogen's lineage and Soto Zen Buddhism. I want nothing to do with the San Francisco Zen Center, the Houston Zen Center, the Soto Shu, the Zen Shuji in Los Angeles, any of those institutions. I really don't want to have anything to do with those big institutions that claim to represent Soto Zen Buddhism institutionally, because I think they've gone completely around the bend, and I think they've got no clue what Soto Zen Buddhism is about. But on the other hand, I think Dogen got it right. And if I didn't think Dogen got it right, I wouldn't be practicing in Dogen's lineage. And I don't know, I just wanted to kind of put that out there. It's not that I'm like going, well, Dogen said it, I believe it, that settles it, that sort of bumper sticker type thing. I don't think Dogen is infallible or was infallible. I don't think that every utterance that came out of his pen, I was going to say mouth, but I never heard what came out of his mouth, but I know what he wrote. I don't think everything is correct because Dogen said it and because he's divine and because he's infallible. But I think as far as a person getting on the right direction and the right path and kind of putting something down that really makes sense and that's really worthwhile following, I think as far as anybody can do that, I think Dogen did it, and I think it's worth pursuing. But I also think that, and I've said this before, I think, well, somebody asked Nishijima Roshi once to define what he thought Buddha was. If Buddha wasn't a god or a prophet or, infallible divine being, that kind of thing, what was Buddha? And Nishijima Roshi said that he thought Buddha was kind of a genius. And that's what I think about Buddha and what I think about Dogen. Kind of geniuses. And when I think of geniuses, I think of somebody like Einstein or Stephen Hawking or somebody like that. You don't think that Einstein or Stephen Hawking or people like that are infallible or gods, but you do think that within their field of endeavor, they're the kind of people that you have to be pretty good to want to question Einstein or Stephen Hawking. You got to be pretty good in your field to want to try to knock those guys down. Which isn't to say that nobody can knock those guys down, because there have been people who've gone and said, "Oh, Einstein was wrong about this," or "Stephen Hawking was wrong about this," and then they can kind of go and build on their theories, which I also think you can do with Buddha and with Dogen. But they are giants in their fields, and because they are giants in their fields, they're worth pursuing. And so, I don't know, this is kind of maybe a little scattershot, but I thought I would introduce you to that idea and tell you why I think there's no such thing as Zen Buddhism. So there you go. If you want to support me in my pursuit of Zen Buddhism, you can do that by going to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually my only ways of making a living, and I thank you for your support. But as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me, because this is offered for free. So we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Thank you. Laters. Bye. There's Ziggy. He didn't want to come outside because it's too cold today. He just wanted to stay in here and sit in the sunbeam. So there's his cameo. Alright, Ziggy, I'm going to go edit the video. See you later.